Hmm. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee's online worship service. I'm Reverend Jennifer Nordstrom, and I am honored to serve as First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee's senior minister. We welcome people of all genders, sexualities, ages, races, ethnicities, histories, and bodies. We welcome your mind, your heart, and your spirit. We welcome all that you're carrying with you today and all your heart longs to set down. I'd like to welcome you into our worship service after me. We gather to nurture the spirit, engage the mind, and inspire action.
Good morning. I'm Dina McFeeters, First Unitarian Society Milwaukee's Associate Minister. These opening words are by Starhawk from Dreaming the Dark. We are all longing to go home, to some place we have never been, a place half remembered and half envisioned, we can only catch glimpses of from time to time. Community. Somewhere, there are people to whom we can speak with passion without having the words catch in our throats. Somewhere, a circle of hands will open to receive us. Eyes will light up as we enter. Voices will celebrate with us whenever we come into our own power. Community means strength that joins with our strength to do the work that needs to be done. Arms to hold us when we falter, a circle of healing, a circle of friends, someplace where we can be free. Let's return to our beloved sanctuary for the chalice lighting, a symbol of Unitarian Universalism.
My name is Kimberly Tomchek Carlson. I am the Minister of Religious Education at First Church, and the story I have for you today is Stone Soup. This version is by John Muth. 3 monks, Hawk, Locke, and Sue, traveled along a mountain road. They talked about cat whiskers and the color of the sun and giving. "What makes one happy?" asked Hawk. Let's find out," said Sue, the wisest monk. Their gaze fell to the rooftops of the village below. They could not see from so high above that the village had gone through many hard times. Sickness and famine, fire and floods had made the villagers very wary and very distrusting of strangers. They had even become suspicious of their own neighbors. The villagers worked hard, but only for themselves. There was a farmer, a tea merchant, a scholar, a seamstress, a doctor, and many others, but they had little to do with one another. When the monks reached the gates, all the villagers disappeared into their houses. No one greeted them. They closed their windows up tight. The monks knocked on the door of the first house. There was no answer. They knocked on the second door, and the same thing happened. It happened again and again, from one house to the next. These people do not know happiness," said Sue, "but today we will show them how to make stone soup." They made a fire and they placed a small tin pot on top and filled it with water from the village well. A brave little girl who had been watching them said, "What are you doing?" "We're making a fire. We're making stone soup," said Hawk. "We need 3 round, smooth stones." They found them and they put them in the water together to cook. These stones will make excellent soups, but it is a very small pot. I'm afraid it won't make much. My mother has a big pot, said the girl, and she ran home and told her mother, 3 strangers are making soup from stones. They need our biggest pot. I'd like to learn how to do that, said her mother. As the smoke drifted up from the pot, the neighbors peered out their windows. One by one, the people of the village came out to see just what stone soup was. Of course, old-style stone soup should be well seasoned with salt and pepper, said Hawk. I have some salt and pepper, said the scholar, his eyes big with curiosity. He disappeared and came back with salt and pepper and even a few other spices. Sue took a taste. The last time we had soup like this, carrots made the broth very sweet. I have a few carrots, said a woman, and when she returned, she was carrying many carrots and dropped them into the pot. Do you think it would be better with onions? Asked Locke. Oh yes, onions would make it taste really good, said a farmer, and he hurried off, returning with 5 big onions, and he dropped them into the bubbling soup. Now that's a fine soup, he said. But if we only had some mushrooms, said Hawk, rubbing his chin. Several villagers returned with mushrooms and noodles and pea pods and cabbages. Something magical began to happen among the villagers as each person opened up their heart to give. The next person gave even more. And as this happened, the soup got richer and smelled more delicious. Garlic, ginger root, soy sauce, I have some, people cried out. The monks stirred the bubbling pot. Oh, how good it smelled, how good it would taste, how giving the villagers had become. At last the soup is ready. The villagers gathered together. They brought rice and cake and tea to drink, and they lit their lanterns. Everyone sat down to eat. They had not been together for a feast like this in as long as anyone could remember. After the banquet, they told stories, they sang songs, and celebrated into the night. And that night, the monks were welcomed into their homes. In the morning, everyone gathered together to say farewell. Thank you for having us. You've been quite generous, said the monks. Thank you, said the villagers. With the gifts you have given, we will always have plenty. You have shown us that sharing makes us all richer. Just think, said the monks, to be happy is as simple as making stone soup.
Bread alone ain't never been enough. You could eat that stuff all day, you could fill your belly up. Your body's hunger is very real. You could eat the biggest meal, but nobody can live on bread alone. You got to marvel at how things grow. You got to harvest what you sow. And you got to stand out in the fields. 'Cause out there you know, bread alone ain't never been enough. You could eat that stuff all day, you could fill your belly up. Your body's hunger is very real. You could eat the finest meal. Nobody can live on bread alone. Now you got to knead and work the dough. And you got to wait and hope it grows. You might have to ask someone who knows just how it goes. Bread alone ain't never been enough. You could eat that stuff all day, you could fill your belly up. Your body's hunger is very real. You could eat the biggest meal. Nobody can live on bread alone. Now you got to put it on a plate. You got to say, hey, that smells great. Somebody will say, let's have a taste. I didn't know you baked. Bread alone ain't never been enough. You could eat that stuff all day, you could fill your belly bread alone. You got to remember the yeast and wheat. You got to remember every time you eat. You got to remember there's folks in need. Take it out on the street and let them know that bread alone ain't never been enough. You could eat that stuff all day, you could fill your belly up. Your body's hunger's very real. You could eat the finest meal, but nobody can live on bread alone. Now you could eat the finest meal, a rack of lamb and a breaded veal, but nobody can live on bread alone.
Well, that was just beautiful. Thank you so much for that. I'm so sorry to share with you the news of a death in our congregation. Lisa Radke died of natural causes at the new home she shared with her husband, Mike Radke, in Columbus, Ohio, on Monday, September 7th, 2020. Lisa was 55 years old and was a member of First Church for 27 years. She served on staff as our membership coordinator from 1997 to 2004. Mike Radke welcomes cards at his new address in Ohio, and there will be an opportunity for people to gather today online, informally, to remember Lisa immediately following the worship service today. The link for that informal gathering is in your private chat now. If you want to attend, copy that link down. Because of security, we're not sharing it in the permanent links. So go ahead and copy it down. Information about a late September online memorial service will be forthcoming, along with information about where to send memorial donations in honor of Lisa. Thus, as is our tradition in this church, whenever we have a birth, an adoption, or a death among our members, we light our candle of life. Today, in honor of Lisa Radke. I'd like to invite you now to join me in the spirit of meditation and prayer. So just take a moment to find yourself wherever you are. Feel your body and whatever it's doing right now. Maybe you can feel your sit bones sitting on whatever's beneath you, or maybe you can feel your feet touching the floor. Maybe you can feel your breath moving in and out of your body, and let it bring you into being here and now. Spirit of life and love, Holy One of our being and our becoming, that which is sacred within, among, and beyond us. Come hold us today. This day of gathering in and also of letting out and letting go. This day of beauty and also of grief. this day that holds the rising sun and its setting, this day of all that is birth and death, hope and loss, humanity and cruelty. May we stretch our souls to grow as fast as and large as the world, stretch and grow as wide as the water that sometimes crashes and sometimes laps on the shore. Stretch our souls to grow as wide as the wind that whispers over it and swirls up into the leaves. Stretch our souls to grow as wide as the ground beneath us that climbs up into mountain peaks. Stretch our souls to grow as wide as the fiery sun shining down and warming this earth. May our breath help us stretch. May our brains help us stretch. May rest help us stretch to be as wide as this world in all of its complexity. May it be so, and amen.
In his book, The Snow Leopard, Peter Mathiasson wrote, "To glimpse one's own true nature is a kind of homegoing, to a place east of the sun, west of the moon, the homegoing that needs no home." This has been a year to test our own true natures, and I can't help but think of this ingathering, this homecoming to a virtual space, as a homegoing that needs no home. But even in virtual space, we remain an old yet ever new, ever renewed community of memory and hope. In recent years, I have engaged deeply with the work of the Center for Courage and Renewal. A central notion in that work is that deep inside, each of us has an inner wisdom which can help us see ourselves honestly. And through that glimpse of our own true nature, we find our way home to a whole life, a life that can offer the world its authentic gifts and authentic connection. And I have relearned that to see myself whole requires an honest, sometimes painfully honest, examination of the pain and ugliness within, as well as the sunshine and joy. I've learned that I must be honest in memory if I want to find any hope of renewal. And I've learned that accepting the truth of it all, the beauty and the pain, is hard. It's awfully hard, but it's necessary for true renewal. In a recent Courage and Renewal gathering, we were invited to reflect on and write a response to a beautifully powerful Langston Hughes poem titled Daybreak in Alabama. Its first lines are, "When I get to be a colored composer, I'm going to write me some music about daybreak in Alabama." Hughes was a Black poet who wrote during the Harlem Renaissance in Jim Crow America about dreams of a better America. 80 years later, his poem spoke to something deep and urgent in me. My response was this poem, titled When I Get to Be a Composer, after Langston Hughes. I'm going to write me some music about daybreak in the fields, about dawn in the woodland and morning twilight at sea, with sounds of water in the creek, and the mourning dove in evening, and wind in the piney woods. I'll put in the patter of rain on the porch roof and quiet talk on the porch. Then I'm going to put in the sounds of gunshots, the bitter stench of tear gas, and the bass drum thump of batons on bodies, and the sigh of a last breath. And I'll put in the sounds of hearts breaking, the sounds of fathers weeping and daughters, brothers, sisters, and mothers crying out for kindness, for caring, for justice. And then I'll put in some silence to honor the pain in all the hearts that plead for something different, something better, something kind. Some silence to honor that pain. And then I'm going to put in some whispers of hope, touch of loving arms, the sweet taste of waters in a common cup, and a ringing bell of justice. And I'll put in the sounds of peace, breathing quiet through all the ages in all the lands and all the people's hearts, when I write me some music about daybreak in the fields. These are days of anguish and weeping, and still when I stand by the water at daybreak, when I think of your faces out there and your work for justice, I see such beauty in this world and such courage. Some days it is so hard to hold all those things in the same hands. But as an African-American friend from Hattiesburg, Mississippi told me, "Brother," she said, "ain't nobody say it was going to be easy. It takes courage to get to renewal." I think she's right, and I trust that as we walk together, we will find good courage every day, and so find our way again and yet again to renewal. Welcome home, everyone. Welcome home.
Mm. Oh, that was just so lovely to see all of your smiling faces. Thank you to everyone who sent in their photos. I'm really grateful. I miss being in person with you. I am learning in this pandemic just how nourishing being in the same physical space really is. I'm also learning how fear creeps into the crevices that physical distance leaves in the soul. It's both my joy and my job to love people and to see the very best in them. And yet, since the pandemic began, I have found myself more wary of strangers and distrusting of my neighbors, like the villagers were in the stone soup this morning. I'm going to tell you an embarrassing and somewhat disappointing story about myself because I'm human like you are, and I'm also in this dreadful soup of anxiety and loss and fear and grief. It's hard to be a human right now, and it's even harder to be one that lives up to all of our Unitarian Universalist values and ideals. So here we go. I preach to you all about love and connection and reaching out and connecting and learning across difference, cultivating compassion for our fellow human beings and living our Unitarian Universalist values out in the world. And last week, when I was walking my dog across a busy street, a car stopped to let me cross in the crosswalk. My little Charlie dog and I were waiting on the corner, and we were watching car after car hurry up and down the street. Charlie was sniffing his favorite fire hydrant, and I was looking up and down the street, calculating how many cars would need to go before we would have enough time to safely cross the street. And when this car stopped for us, kindly, it ruined all my calculation and forced me to go now on the car's schedule. And I got angry with the car. I think I gave an exasperated sigh, and I literally said, "Ugh, you've got to be freaking kidding me." I was exhausted. And I felt rushed, and I didn't feel like I had the resources to deal with processing a choice to cross the street on a different schedule than what I had planned. I think that the driver actually heard me sigh and say, "You've got to be freaking kidding me," and laughed at me. Thank goodness they had the resources to respond with laughter. So I laughed as well, and I sheepishly said, "Thank you," and waved as I hurried across the street. And my friend who was walking with me laughed and laughed at me, and I was able to see myself and laugh a little bit too. I am at the point of exhaustion and depletion where I'm getting mad at strangers who are trying to do me a kindness, who are stopping and slowing down to let me cross a busy street in the sidewalk. The psychiatrist and author, Dr. Daniel Amen, talks about the pandemic that we're in as, quote, a global amygdala hijacking. He estimates that everyone across the world is feeling about 30% more stress on their amygdala. And while I doubt that Dr. Amen has done a baseline stress study followed by a global pandemic brain imaging average stress increase, I do find his estimate to be helpful context for what we're dealing with right now. Just take your average baseline stress level and everyone else's and add 30% to it. That's 30% more fight or flight or freeze. That's 30% more fights about masks at Walmart, or 30% more quarantine tiffs with your spouse about the dishes, or 30% more sibling arguments and tears over homework or impossible technology or dinner. People say that Americans are more divided now than ever, that we have less tolerance for difference, less capacity to resolve conflicts, less empathy for one another. Well, if we're all 30% more likely to fight right now, and 30% more in our amygdala than in our neocortex, our rational thinking brain, that makes sense, doesn't it? In a recent article entitled, "Your Surge Capacity is Depleted, It's Why You Feel Awful," the science journalist Tara Hale describes the work of Dr. Ann Maston on surge capacity. Dr. Maston, who's a psychologist and professor of child development, defines surge capacity as a collection of adaptive systems, both mental and physical, that human beings draw on for short-term survival in acutely stressful situations such as natural disasters, unquote. Now, we are in an acutely stressful situation, a natural disaster, but the pandemic is not an acute experience. We've been in it now for more than 6 months, and the end date is ambiguous. Dr. Maston says, quote, "It's normal in a situation of great uncertainty and chronic stress to get exhausted and to feel ups and downs, to feel like you're depleted or you're experiencing periods of burnout." End of quote. Because surge capacity is designed to be used by human beings in acute situations, and the situation that we're in is both chronic and indefinite, Maston says that we need to consciously develop different modes of coping. What we're in right now is a situation of ongoing loss with no clear resolution and no end date. In grief studies, this kind of loss is called ambiguous loss, and it can make the grieving process more difficult because of its ambiguity. The lack of clarity can stretch out the grieving and make it confusing. What is it that I'm supposed to be grieving right now, and how long will this last? Will I get back the things that I'm missing? And what is lost potentially forever? The confusion exacerbates normal parts of the grieving process, parts like denial and bargaining. Because the bounds of this loss are unclear, there's a temptation here to lean into denial. The pandemic isn't happening, or it's a hoax, or it's just the flu. And because the terms of the losses are unclear, there's a temptation to try to bargain our way out of this loss. If I just do X thing, then maybe I can avoid losing Y. If I just wash my hands 47 times, then maybe I won't lose my sense of safety. Or if I can just meet in person at church, then maybe I won't lose my sense of social connection. Denial and bargaining are both normal parts of the grieving process, and we can have compassion for them as coping mechanisms. It doesn't mean that we should do things that are unsafe or not have good public or institutional policy because people are coping with their grief in complex but normal ways. It just means that we can understand those behaviors as grief rather than malice. We also need to understand that no amount of denial or bargaining will make the pandemic go away. We have to face it. That's part of the work of grief. One tool in grief work is recognizing and acknowledging feelings. Naming the things that you feel sad about or mad about or confused about. Acknowledging the ways that things have changed that you don't like. Now, this might feel counterintuitive in our positivity-focused culture, but it can actually help your brain accept what's happening right now instead of fighting against it, which can bring some relief to the anxiety and confusion. So go ahead and say it. This stinks. Make a list maybe, write it down. Here are the things that stink about this. I've taken to telling my friends every week that I hate the pandemic, just in case they were unclear about my feelings or if they thought I might have come around to thinking the pandemic is cool. I want to let them know, no, I don't. I give them regular updates. I do not like the pandemic. I hate the pandemic. It helps me to be able to express my negative feelings. Another coping mechanism that Maston recommends for dealing with this long-term and chronic experience of ambiguous loss is to expect less. I'm going to say that again. Expect less. Expect less of yourself. Expect less of other people around you. Expect less out in the world. It's not only you whose surge capacity is depleted. It's everybody. Everyone has 30% more stress and amygdala activity going on, and everyone is spent. Not only will your systems be depleted, so will your families. So will your coworkers. So will the person's driving down the street or the person trying to cross the street in front of the driver. So will the person getting groceries next to you. Now, of course, it's important to remember that people with more resources have more to rely on in their states of depletion. So there are real material hierarchies in terms of who is being hit hardest and trying to cope with material losses. But even folks with more resources have had their mental and emotional and energetic reserves depleted. So expect less. Expect less of yourself. Expect less of the people around you. Now, it's interesting to note that Dr. Maston says this expect less recommendation might be harder for overachievers. Now, congregation, I see you. You are some high achieving, ambitious, and active people. But this is not the year for high achievements. It's just not. And I encourage you to give yourselves and each other a break, even if doing that is hard. In that spirit, I'd like to share this poem by Adrienne Suzanne Cousereau, who wrote it in honor of Mary Oliver's poem, Wild Geese. It's called Mary Oliver for Corona Times, Thoughts after the poem, Wild Geese. You do not have to become totally Zen. You do not have to use this isolation to make your marriage better, your body slimmer, your children more creative. You do not have to maximize the benefits by using this time to work even more, to write the best-selling Corona diaries, or to preach the gospel of Zoom. You only have to let the soft animal of your body unlearn that you are nothing if not productive, to unlearn that consumption equals happiness, to unlearn that the most important unit is the single self, and to unlearn that you are at your best when you resemble an efficient machine. And to return to Mary Oliver's wisdom for a moment. Just let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. In order to do that, we have to be here now, experience what is going on around us, and do our best to appreciate what's good about it and to feel our feelings about what's not. This is part of our ongoing practice of developing our spiritual capacity to hold the full range of what life contains: beauty and tragedy, love and trauma. It is the spiritual work of strengthening our capacity for ambiguity, our capacity to experience discomfort and gratitude at the same time, to expand our emotional range. I learned a powerful lesson about the human capacity to hold both what is good in this life at the same time as what is awful from one of our members who gave me permission to share this with you. A humanist. He told me that he never knows what I'm talking about when I talk about God. But when his beloved wife was very ill, he took care of her. As her health deteriorated, he had to do more and more daily tasks for her, bathing her, helping her eat, even helping her use the toilet. It was unbelievably awful, slowly losing the woman that he loved more than anything in the world. And he told me that he never came as close to understanding God as when he was taking care of his wife like that. The simple practice of helping her do everyday functions washed him and her in a love so powerful and so profound that he was able to say that if there is any kind of God, it's that. It's that kind of love in the most painful moments. The most powerful love is right there too. Feel your feelings. Slow down and expect less. Learn to hold the full range of human experience, the tragedy, the ambiguity, the beauty. This sounds a lot like the spiritual practices I've been preaching to you about for years. And it is. But this moment both is and is not the same as the other years we've leaned into those spiritual practices. It reminds me of the saying, "Make it new," from the modernist movement at the turn of the 20th century. That was a phrase that was coined by the poet Ezra Pound and was repeated by artists and authors and modernists almost as a prayer. Make it new. Modernism certainly made a lot of things new. It changed people's perceptions of reality. It remade art and literature. When modernism came about, World War I, had turned the way society knew itself on its head. And in modernism, artists used art and literature to try to expose the disintegration and irrationality and decay that was built into the systems of the society that they lived in. They used art to expose that rather than to represent the dominant culture. Art became resistance rather than representation. Make it new was the idea that the new was not simply a return to the old, but something radically different. Ironically, however, Ezra Pound, the poet who coined that phrase, had developed it from texts that were ancient. And he had renewed the saying rather than making it new from scratch. It was in his translation of an ancient Confucian text on good governance that Pound was taken by a text that said, "Renew thyself daily, utterly, make it new, and again new, make it new." However, Pound was translating the French "fais-le de nouveau" as "make it new," which, according to Michael North in his 2013 article, "The Making of Make It New," quote, might just as easily been rendered "do it again." Make it new. The cry of the modernist new movement actually came from an ancient phrase that might as well mean do it again. Our spiritual practice in pandemic times are both new, utterly, daily, shockingly new, and also quite old, ancient. The same prescription as the last upheaval. Do it again. Like the turn of the last century and its deep suffering and change and resistance to the prevailing hierarchical order, we both have and have not been here before. In our own time to make it new. We both need to transformatively imagine a future that has never been and build on the work of the past. We need to lean into the old and time-tested spiritual tools of strengthening our capacity to deal with ambiguity, to feel the full range of our feelings and experience the full range of the world, and be grateful for what is right now. We also need to do things differently than we have been. We need to expect less and rest more and give other people as well as ourselves more grace and compassion for failure. But there's also a way that slowing down and consuming less is a return to ancient practice. Like Dale said, this church year is going to be different than any other. When I feel afraid or inadequate to the task of utterly making it new, I remember two things. One, it both is and is not new. And two, I'm not in this alone. Church is and will always be what we make of it together. This world, this life is and will always be what we make of it together. We will both make it new this year, and we will just do it again. We'll nourish our spirits. We'll fill up the well. We'll learn and transform. We'll connect with people and purpose. We have the opportunity to be part of a community and to even be part of society reimagining itself, to be part of people creatively thinking about how to resolve conflict without relying on the threat or use of force, to be part of following the lead of people most directly affected by injustice, and to be part of continuing to live our Unitarian Universalist values in the 21st century. And just like our ancestors 100 years ago, the modernists and the folks in our congregation who also lived through a pandemic, all of this is new, and all of it isn't. We don't have to be perfectly Zen or come up with a completely new way of being or do it all better on our own. It will be imperfect. It will be messy. Some pieces will drop. The tech won't always work. You're going to get frustrated. I'll get frustrated. But we'll be with each other. And hopefully we might even get a chance to see ourselves and have a laugh. All we have to do right now is be human, imperfectly, and dream and create and rest and listen and love what the soft animal of our bodies love in this new and also not new world of beauty and of loss. Welcome again. Welcome today. Welcome home. May it be so, and amen. Thank you so much to our lovely choir. What a gift to have two pieces from you today. And thank you to everyone for your generosity. Pledges are at the core of our church's spiritual practice of generosity, and we're also grateful for the additional gifts that you give to support this ministry. We thank all of the folks out there who are appreciating our online offerings and supporting it by texting 73256 with the message "Give to you," or who are giving on our website. Your gifts continue to help us provide this ministry. We also share the plate with an organization each month. In September, our Share the Plate recipient is the River West Food Pantry, which comes together around food to relieve hunger, improve lives, and grow community well-being. You can go to their website and give with the note STP from FUSM. You can see all of these options on your screen now, and they will live on in the YouTube comments section of this video after worship is over. Thank you so much for giving right now or when you come back to this video later. Your support keeps us and our community partners going. We rely on it. Thank you so much. And as we close our worship service today, I want to say humbly, in gratitude, that I am so grateful to be with you all, even when we're physically distant. I want to remind you to feel your feelings, to expect less, to know that you don't have to be perfectly zen, and to learn to appreciate the good that is here and now. May it be so, and amen.
We are going, heaven knows where we are going. We know within, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Whoa, yeah, yeah. 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 Yum. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Yum. Oh, yeah, yeah. Yum. Oh, yeah, yeah. We are going.